Coming back from a meditation retreat like Vipassana, do you struggle to maintain the inspiration and discipline to keep meditating on a regular basis? If so, then stay tuned because in this episode, we're talking about ways to overcome this particular problem in your meditation journey. My name is Abhinabha, and this is Ancient Wisdom Thoughts, a bi-weekly soulful conversation about spiritual growth and matters of the heart and soul. This episode is about the spiritual meaning of dreams. We all have them, but how can we understand their deeply symbolic language and let them help us in our spiritual growth? We talk about how you can discover the sacred and highly personal messages that your dreams are giving you. So toss out all those books on dream analysis and dream interpretation, because ultimately, you are the only one who can properly understand and interpret your own dreams. We also offer in this episode a special meditation technique to help you remember your dreams and a special technique to prevent you from having nightmares. Please consider subscribing and let us know in the comments if there's any problem or topic that you'd like us to discuss in our future episodes. Enjoy this episode. I wanted to introduce a new section of the podcast, which we call Problems. Are they really problems? This is after a book that Sri Chinmoy wrote about how to deal with problems in your spiritual life. And both you and me are giving meditation classes. And we come across seekers a lot who are dealing with different challenges and problems in their spiritual life. So each episode, we're going to pick one of them and we're going to talk about it a little bit and hopefully offer some solutions of how to deal with those problems. And so maybe we just dive right into this new section. So nowadays, when people do a meditation retreat, they're very popular nowadays where people go on multi-day retreats, meditation retreats. And what is problematic for many seekers is they get very inspired during the retreat and they get all the opportunity to meditate for long hours and make spiritual progress. But then when they come back to their daily life, like how do you keep the inspiration from that retreat going? And many times after a few days or weeks, the inspiration is kind of taken over by the hustle and bustle of everyday life. So how do you keep that inspiration to meditate going in your daily life? How do you keep the progress that you've made during the retreat alive in your daily life? Do you want to say something about that?
Yeah, because I've seen the same thing when I've been traveling around the world, that many people a few times a year or maybe once a year will go on a meditation retreat, and it doesn't often translate to them having a really solid practice. And I think what you want to think about there is, why was it possible at the retreat for you to meditate on a regular basis and every day and put a lot of time and energy into it? And so the main thing for me there is the environment is different. So you're in an environment where it's specifically set up to make it as easy as possible for you to do your practice. So all of the distractions and all of the problems in your life that you normally have to deal with are taken away. And so you've got more time and space then to put that energy towards your practice. And so obviously when you come back into your life, it's not possible to just remain, or it's probably not even advisable to remain living on a meditation retreat for the rest of your days to keep up your practice. But what you want to think is, what parts of the environment that you were surrounded by made it easy for you to practice? And then try and take some of those ideas and actually try and change your own environment in your home situation.
Can you give some practical examples of that?
Yeah, so like, for example, if you do a Vipassana course, you don't have your phone with you. And so when you get up in the morning, there's not even that temptation for you to get up and first of all check social media or look at the internet. And so taking some cues from that and think, okay, so when I wake up in the morning, I want to have my phone in a different room. So don't leave it in the room with you. So there's always that temptation. You just want to check your messages. I just want to see if anyone's got in touch with me or someone's replied to that important email I sent. Keep the phone as far away from you as possible, and perhaps just buy a simple alarm clock. So you can have the alarm clock in your room. And so instead of, because a lot of people say, oh, well, I need my phone for the alarm, which is a ludicrous solution, because you used to have an alarm clock. You never needed your phone to be the alarm clock. But now we've sort of conflated the phone with doing all of those
It's
things.
like before the phone, there was no such thing as alarm clocks. We always did without some magical reason.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can buy an alarm clock, at a cheap shop for only a few dollars. So having an alarm, is a separate alarm away from your phone, and so you can leave your phone outside of your room. So take away that temptation to start with. And then it depends on your lifestyle and the things that are most difficult for you. But often in a retreat setting, you have a lot more discipline and structure. So often the course requires you to get up at certain times of the day and go to bed at certain times of the day. So trying to bring some of that discipline and that focus and structure into your own life. And so you have to start first of all with imagination. You have to imagine, because you managed to do that when you were in that environment. So you have to bring that reality and realize that you can actually do what you want to do. So if you want to get up at 6 o'clock or 5:30 or whenever it is in the morning, to give yourself enough time to actually do your practice, you've shown to yourself that that is possible, but you have to have some form of discipline. And so very often people want the sweet experiences, but don't want to pay the price to achieve those sweet experiences. And so it's being wise and thinking, okay, if I want to be able to meditate well, I can't be staying up till 2 a.m. every morning, because it's going to make it much, much harder for me to get up, and I will run out of time. So yeah, trying to create that same sort of structure in your life that you found, especially if you found it enjoyable and meaningful when you were on retreat. It's trying to take some of those things and actually put them into practice in your daily life.
Yeah, and I would maybe add to that also finding a community, because that is such a powerful tool. If you got into meditation from a retreat or you just really launched into that practice, how do you keep it going? A community is a tremendous help. It's like that also with other things that you want to continue doing, like a fitness regime or starting a running practice, or learning how to play an instrument or a language. If you have a group of people that come together once a week and do that with you, it's a tremendous motivation to keep on going. And I would say more so even with meditation, like you and I are both part of an international community, the Sri Chinmoy centers, and that has been, for me, that has been like an amazing blessing over the years to have that community, to always be inspired, because that's what happens in a community. There's other people there. You meditate in a group, and you just have that motivation to go back to it all the time and to keep it alive in your life. And if you don't have a community right now, I would even say, before you go on the retreat, like, already start looking for a community that when you get back, that you can transition into having a meditation practice, and looking for somewhere where you can continue that practice with other people, with like-minded souls.
Yeah, I think that's also very fundamental, because the world is constantly pulling at you. And so if you don't have a group of people on the same side as you who are pulling in that direction, you'll find that as just one lone individual, it's very hard to stay in the world and not get pulled by the forces of the world. And the world is pulling you towards all of the other activities going on. And the world is not really promoting in your day-to-day life normally the practice of meditation. So having some people on your side who are going to help
And
keep
I
you
would also
inspired.
Yeah, and I would also say, when you leave a retreat, there is always going to be a little bit of a disappointment, a little bit of a dip. You had such a magical experience, and you go back to the ordinary life. You and me go on retreats a couple of times a year with our communities, with our spiritual centers. And for me, there's always a moment when you come back to your normal life where, it was so beautiful there in New York when we come together, or in another country. That this is natural. This always happens. So kind of accept that there's going to be a little bit of a lull in your consciousness, that it's going to take a few days to readjust, and it's a little bit of a painful or disappointing few days. But if you can accept that is part of the experience of transitioning back into your normal life, then some of that inspiration will linger. It will continue to inspire you if you really run with it. So you really put that inspiration to practice, and accept that it's not going to be the same as on the retreat, but you want to keep as much of it as possible.
And one thing that happens as well is that you forget the difficulties when you go on a meditation retreat. When you go away from it, like a week later or 2 weeks later, you look back on it and you only remember the really profound meditations you had, or the great insights you received. But you forget all the moments of boredom and the tediousness of doing the practice repeatedly, and the discomfort and all of these things. And so then when you come back into your life, you're kind of expecting to just have the high experiences, but you forget that the price you actually paid for those experiences was actually very high as well. Because often on a retreat, you'll be doing many hours of practice every day, which is normally not really sustainable for people as well. So trying to find and get a balance in your life where you don't have time, if you're still working and doing all your daily activities, to be practicing 6, 8, 10 hours a day. So realizing that the key thing in your life is to try and make a sustainable lifetime practice. So it's you're going to get a lot more from practicing every single day, even if it's for 15 or 20 minutes, than you would if you just go to a retreat once a year and then come back from that and then spend the rest of the year looking back at how good that time was, but not having a practice to move forward with.
Yeah, and then I think another misconception is that people sometimes think that only on the retreat are they really making a lot of progress, a lot of spiritual breakthroughs. But actually, I think when you are living your daily day-to-day lives, that is when you can make tremendous progress as well, because there you have the responsibilities. And on the retreat, there's no responsibilities. And actually, Sri Chinmoy once commented this to one of his students who was complaining about how beautiful, the retreats always were. And then when he had to get back to his normal life, he felt that it was, he was not making any progress. And Sri Chinmoy actually tell them, no, that is actually the moment when you're going under the weights again in your home. You're taking these responsibilities. It's almost like you're carrying a weight and you're pushing that weight all the time. And that is actually making you stronger. So instead of that the progress only happens during the retreat, there's some progress there in purely in your meditation, but the actual real progress you make as a person, your growth, can be much stronger if you are in your day-to-day life and you're carrying on your different responsibilities.
Yeah, I do like that analogy of the daily practice and the daily life actually being the process of actually strengthening your spirituality. So that's a nice point there.
Okay, lovely. So I think we offered some insights there about how to transition back from a retreat into daily life. Now I wanted to introduce another new section, which we call the aphorism of the week. We're going to recite one of Sri Chinmoy's aphorisms. He wrote thousands of them. They're little spiritual poems, a little bit of wisdom contained in a very short few sentences. And I just wanted to introduce them one on each show, and we will talk a little bit about it just to get different perspectives on these little nuggets of truth. So this is then the aphorism of the week. All right, here we go. He who thinks and feels that every change has a special significance is indeed extremely wise.
So the immediate quality that comes to mind for me is the quality of acceptance. So the accepting of the experiences that one is having and one is forced to have on a daily basis just to be alive here on earth. And for me, that power of acceptance is the power to allow all of those experiences to come in without resisting against them and fighting against them, and without demanding that the world be some other way that perhaps you would like it to be more. It's this beautiful flow of letting go of the desiring and the grasping and the accepting of what actually is. And that is profoundly wise, because when we do that, we put ourselves in alignment with reality. So we're no longer arguing against, fighting against, pushing back against reality, trying to make it some other way. And for me, that is the epitome of a wise approach to life, of accepting what is, and then from there we can take our conscious will and try and create other realities or try and move towards things that we value. But until we actually fully accept what is, we're always going to be creating suffering and problems in our own life. So it is a very a powerful and wise approach.
Yeah, I would maybe add to that that the aphorism speaks about how it's a special significance. So I think every single change in your life can have special significance. I think if you give it that, if you consider it as something that has come to you, that life has put into your path to grow. So whether it's adversity or prosperity, whether it's something good or bad, whether it's something your mind resists, naturally, the voice in your head kind of says, oh, no, 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 not this thing, not right now. I don't need this. But sometimes those things are really the things that make us grow or that open up new avenues in our life that we never thought we would never have gone there ourselves if we just followed our mind's guidance. But somehow life or the divine or the universe, whatever you want to call it, throws something into our path, a challenge, something that seems on the first glance very difficult or challenging. But then when we do accept it with enthusiasm and something that life is there, is giving us to teach us, to make us stronger, then each event can have this special significance, each change. And of course, these events change us all the time. So, it can be a change in our circumstances or a change in our friendships or in our job situation or in our living situation or in our inner state. And so these can all be extremely significant because they help us, I think, navigate life and become wiser.
Yeah, because the nature of life is change. And so no matter how much we enjoy one particular time or space or situation, if we try and hold on to it too tightly, we're only going to cause ourselves suffering, because that too will end. And so it's the putting yourself into a relationship with the way that the universe is actually working. If you try and create this sort of bunker for yourself, where you try and insulate yourself from all of the changes in the world, that's never going to work, and it's only going to cause you much grief in the long term. So it seems as though a wise person would try and understand where they are. What is the environment I'm living in? What is the type of universe or place that I'm living in? And then you would try and set yourself up in a way that you're in harmony with that, rather than fighting against it. And as soon as you do that, your whole experience of life starts to change. And so all of the great traditions, like going back, from the Taoists to um, all of the religious traditions, have had some injunctions trying to say, hey, there is a way to live in harmony, in tune, in harmony really with reality. And we should try and find that as quickly as we can, because otherwise we are just prolonging the difficulties.
Beautiful. Okay, so now I think it's time to move on to our main subject of this episode, which is dreams. We wanted to talk about dreams in a spiritual sense, and in the sense that what can dreams tell us? What can they? Are they messages from a higher world? How can we deal with dreams? For instance, negative dreams. Do they have a significance too? Or we wanted to discuss all these different aspects of dreams in our spiritual journey and spiritual life. Maybe I can ask you, Vajin, what are your thoughts about dreams in relations to the spiritual life?
So I think dreams, I don't think we've ever lived in a time, or anyone has ever lived in a time on earth, where dreams have been held in such a low light as they are at this particular time. So I think if you look back over the whole span of human history, dreams were always valued incredibly highly, I believe, as something that was going to foretell the future, perhaps, or illumine different ideas around relationships or situations or problems or any of the myriad human experiences. I think dreams previously were always understood as a different way of receiving information about the world. And we know actually quite a lot about how some of the ancient cultures dealt with dreams, because papyrus was found in ancient Egypt, from ancient Egypt, which actually spelled out like to a very high level of detail, how they would go about trying to analyze and understand dreams. So they had a very systematized approach, where if you saw this particular thing in the dream, like if you saw a mirror with your face in it, it meant you were going to have a new life. If you saw another particular sign, it was meaning that you were going to die. If you saw another thing, it was going to mean that there was good fortune. So they had a very systematized approach to looking at dreams and trying to understand them. I don't think there's ever a one size fits all way to approach trying to understand dreams, because dreams are one of the most complex and difficult to understand phenomenon that we experience. And it's really sad to see in the modern world, a lot of science has almost just thrown dreams aside and said that they're some sort of random chaotic activity of the brain, or perhaps they're some sort of random experience that comes from the brain trying to integrate all of our memories and experiences, which
Well, I've
which can
actually, Yeah, if I may interject, because I once wrote an article about dreams, and I discovered that there's actually a whole scientific body of knowledge about dreams. So there's actually dream scientists who
Oh,
research them.
yeah, great. Yeah. Tell me more. What are they up to?
It's a very small number of people, but there are some really dedicated dream researchers, and they have formulated different theories about dreams. So one very accepted theory is that in dreams we practice our behavior for the normal world. So, in a dream you may encounter someone that you have problems with during your life, and just by having that encounter in the dream helps you to perhaps confront that person in real life. And there's all kinds of scenarios. It's the scenario theory where they feel that dreams are presenting us different scenarios, and we can practice because it doesn't have any consequence. So we can practice different reactions that we have to different scenarios in the dream world, and that is a very accepted theory among dream scientists. I don't think they're really into having a spiritual, interpretation of dreams. They're not into like dreams as being having special significance or messages, but there is a scientist in the field who has written a book. He calls it Heads Up Dreams, and he's actually done real scientific research, and had people keep a dream journal for some time, and he would actually analyze the events that they dreamed about, and they would also analyze it, and he asked them to see if some of those things actually came true. And from this research, it followed that about 50% of people's dreams are what is called heads up dreams. So they give us a heads up of some event that is going to happen in the future. So we dream about half of the time of things, not things that we experienced, but things that are actually going to materialize, that are going to happen in the future. And interestingly, this ties into what, for instance, Sri Chinmoy talked about when he spoke about dreams, that they are very often the harbinger of a new reality in your life, especially dreams when they come from a higher plane of consciousness. So that's another thing. Dreams can come from different planes of consciousness. They can come from the mental world, from the vital world. They can also come from the psychic world, this really higher world. And when those dreams come down, the soul will actually try to manifest them in your life. So especially if they're really good dreams, the soul is all about manifesting those. They come really from a higher reality, and then they do manifest. So, many dreams are like that. They are messages from other realities that are trying to manifest themselves in our lives. But yeah, that's interesting that there is a small body of science dealing with dreams.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. And I mean, you can understand as well why some people would imagine that dreams are just totally random. And it's just some random processing of the brain, and it's creating these images and experience. Because sometimes, especially if you're having dreams that are coming from the vital plane, the vital plane is very chaotic, and it's not a rational, orderly place. So the way that information comes to you from that plane is going to appear in a very random, chaotic form. But like you noted, that the dreams can come from many different planes of consciousness. And so if someone is really interested in the information that the dreams are bringing to them, you need to be very discerning that there's many types of dreams that are coming from the lower planes that perhaps are not going to have anything overly useful and not going to be valuable. But just because you have many dreams that are not valuable does not mean that you should disregard those dreams that are coming from the higher planes. And so um, Carl Jung did probably more than anyone to really deepen the understanding of dreams, and he had this concept called big dreams. And so big dreams are the type of dreams that you would only have a handful of times in your life. And so these are really these incredibly powerful, spiritual, illuminating dreams. He always talked, he had this great word called numinous. So he said they had a numinous quality, which was a type of profundity, that you could feel this amazing profundity. And when you were having the dream, it was like you understood that this was some incredibly important visionary experience. And I thought I'd actually just share one of his big dreams, because I think it's very interesting and very revealing. So he shared this himself personally, is that one of his big dreams, and so like I said, you might only have 4 or 5, or only a handful in your life, but he had a dream where he came across this old chapel. I think the chapel was in some way, like the ruins of a chapel. And so he walked inside the chapel, and inside the chapel, sitting on the ground, cross-legged in the lotus position, was an Indian yogi. And as he walked towards the yogi, he noticed that the yogi actually had his face. So the yogi sitting there meditating had Carl Jung's face. And this was actually the comment that he made about it. He said, "When I looked at him more closely, I realized that he had my face. I stared in profound fright and awoke with the thought, aha, so he is the one who is meditating me. He has a dream, and I am it. I knew that when he awakened, I would no longer be." And I thought, wow, that is a dream. That is a profound dream. That
That is
perhaps the
one.
experience that you're having here is a dream that someone else is having.
Oh
We
yeah,
don't know. We don't know how many layers down this whole experience goes. So
exactly. We could all be in a simulation by a very powerful AI.
yeah, this would
Pattern
definitely
recognition.
not be the ideal situation to find yourself
Yeah,
in.
I would say no.
So
Interesting. Yeah, go
So
on.
if we think about dreams a little bit, we want to think that we experience the world predominantly through our minds. So we're experiencing it through the most rational and logical part of our being. And so we experience the information that happens, that comes into our world, and the interactions we have in a particular type of way. It doesn't seem that that is the way that the universe commonly experiences itself, though. So if you look at the way that the animals are experiencing the world, or just simply the fact of how processes and things happen in the world, it often doesn't seem that there's a strong, rational, logical force inside those interactions. And so I think the way we experience life on an everyday basis is like an anomaly. It's not the normal everyday way that information is shared around the universe. And so if we look at dreams, the way that dreams bring information is not in a rational, logical form. It's not being spelled out to us, exactly what this dream means and why we should take it seriously. But instead, it's using the language of symbols. And so I think if we go below or above the human mind, I think the way we experience reality is much more symbolic and experiential rather than like rational and logical. So it makes sense then that if you're receiving information in a dream, that the information will come to you in a much more sort of symbolic form, or by using certain imagery or certain signs that you would actually start to understand what the message of the dream is. And so that's a difficult thing for people, that it requires some interpretation. And so it requires some conscious effort to actually try and deepen your understanding of the dream. Because very often after you awake from a dream, the first thing you'll have is some sort of general feeling of what was going, of what the meaning was, or how it made you feel. But very quickly you forget all of the details. So it's a real art to actually start to try and understand your dreams. And people have sort of posited different ways of going about it. And so it was really in our modern time, I think it was actually Sigmund Freud who actually brought back the idea that the dreams actually had valuable information. But I think perhaps he became too fixated on one particular way of looking at dreams. And that's the thing as well. If you don't understand that dreams are coming from different planes of reality, and you give them all the same weighting, then you're going to start to misunderstand the signs, and you're going to misunderstand what the dreams are trying to offer.
So he was more into the dream as being an outlet for suppressed emotions, right?
Exactly. So he was all about repression. And so, like, for example, and it leads to some very unusual interpretations of dreams. So he had a young lady who came to him, and he was doing dream analysis for her. And so she told him about this dream where she saw all her brothers and sisters romping around in a field. So romping around is not a word we use very often anymore. But they were playing in the field, they were having a great time. And then at some point they all developed wings and they flew away. And so under Sigmund Freud's model, because he was all about the repression of dreams, and he was an incredibly profound and deep man in his own right, and he discovered things that do have some reality to them. But I think with his dream analysis, his idea of repression means that you're always looking on the dark side of the dream. So instead, like if I thought of that dream, I thought, oh well, that sounds like a beautiful image, like seeing all your brothers and sisters like growing wings and flying off, like they're going to some elevated place. He interpreted it that she really wanted all of her brothers and sisters to die. So yeah, that's what
Yeah.
he thought the imagery was. That
Hey,
he saw them growing wings and flying away. That was her repressed way of saying she would like all of them just to die and leave. And I thought,
geez,
yeah,
imagine your therapist saying that to you. That is nice.
yeah, exactly. Imagine that you've come and you're like, had this dream. I wonder what it means. It means you wanted all of your brothers and sisters to die.
Yeah. You're a very bad person. Have a good night. Have a good day.
Yeah, so for me, that is not perhaps the most healthy way of
Yeah, and
looking at dreams.
exactly. Just before you go on, I wanted to mention that when you want to remember your dreams, there's actually a meditation technique that you can do. And it is to meditate or to concentrate on this place in the back of your neck at the beginning of your spine. And so when you wake up, as soon as you wake up and you feel you had a significant dream, but you don't remember it, for a few minutes, like concentrate all your awareness on that place, and then the dream will come back. So that's just a very practical meditation method that you can do to remember your dreams. This is this
Yeah,
place in the back of your neck, like at the head, at the top of your spine.
yeah, that's really useful because a lot of the time you do have some feeling that wow, I just had such a profound dream, and then you go to grasp it, and it just immediately has already slipped through your fingers.
Yeah, it's so frustrating.
So yeah, having that ability to tap into something, which hopefully the dream is still stored there.
Yeah,
So
I've done it a few times and it does work.
yeah. Oh, fantastic. So Carl Jung said something really interesting about dreams. He said, we also live in our dreams. We do not live only by day. Sometimes we accomplish our greatest deeds in dreams.
Oh man, that's so profound. Like your greatest deeds. It would be so funny if you go back to heaven after your life and you're like, hey man, yeah, I think I did a few good things. Yeah, yeah. Your greatest thing you did on this night in October,
Yeah.
1957, when you dreamt about rescuing
So
this person.
So that's the really interesting thing, because what I think you could imagine is that because our truest part of our being is not the physical part of our being, it's not this physicality, it's the soul, the spirit that is embodying itself through this form. When we sleep, that part of our being actually can go to other planes. It can be involved in all sorts of other activities. And so perhaps your soul, while your body is sleeping, your soul is off having great adventures, doing great things, visiting other places and doing all these things. So there is a real reality to that. And it was really interesting. I have a friend who's a psychic, and I've discussed a few of these things with her before. And she actually mentioned that she was talking about some people, how every night their souls are so busy, like traveling to different planes of consciousness and doing different things. And she was really wondering why they were never able to remember that. So she was actually communicating with some of the guides, the spirit guides that she deals with. And so she actually asked them directly that question, like, why is it that human beings with, these good souls and their souls are traveling astrally or in the inner planes and doing different activities, why can they never remember what happened, what they did? And she was so shocked by their response, because the spirit guides who she deals with, who often are the ones that transmit information to her, they said, I'm sorry, we can't tell you that. And that's the only thing that she's ever really come across that they've said, like, there's a hard line, like where we cannot explain to you why that is. You just have to accept it.
Oh
And
wow.
so I thought that was really fascinating. So,
Wow.
so if we go on a little bit with dreams, so Carl Jung had this idea that it's all the repressed parts of our being that is not socially
That's,
acceptable.
that's Freud.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, Freud. So Freud had this idea that in our dreams we will see parts of ourselves that we're repressing and we're hiding from ourselves. And so Jung took a different approach, and so he really, I think, took the idea and deepened it, and there's he actually had a really interesting dream about this as well, which I think captures part of the idea. So he says he had a dream and or a vision, and in it he saw that Freud had dug down and found a basement underneath the house. And so you could say that was, his understanding of the subconscious and dreams and all of these things. He discovered something. But then Carl Jung went down, and from there he expanded that basement into like a multi-room chamber. So he dug down from there, and then started digging further. And from there he discovered that there was a whole, a plethora of rooms down there. And so that whole unconscious space is actually much, much vaster and more complex than Jung had first of all understood. Because Jung, first of all, he broke everything down and collapsed it all down to the sex drive being the predominant force. And if you see the world through only that lens, you're going to come up with very particular types of understandings of the world. And so when Sri Chinmoy actually, when he was in the ashram, in Sri Aurobindo's ashram, he actually read Freud and Jung's work. Because they were very formative thinkers and important thinkers. They still are, but especially at that time. And he said about Jung, and he actually read a compilation of Jung's works when he was living in America. He said that he nearly had it all right. He just needed to go one step further to aspiration. Because Jung had this wonderful idea of individuation, that the goal of life is for you to fully manifest your unique individuality here in the world. And so that was like not just your outside persona, but like really the deepest parts of your being. And so we've talked about that often in the idea of the cosmic game, and your soul's mission or your soul's journey here on earth is perhaps in some way to express itself fully to its deepest depths here on earth. And so he has that the same idea, but Sri Chinmoy said, yes, he had it almost right, but he just needed to go one step further to aspiration. And so, because aspiration is not really a quality that people know about so widely in the West, where it's this really strong sort of burning force that's pushing you to go beyond, to transcend, to grow, to manifest that deepest part of yourself. And I think without that real quality of aspiration, it's actually very, very difficult, unless you're truly a great soul. Like obviously, Carl Jung was one of the great thinkers, and incredibly profound man. But for most other people, without that idea that there's this force of aspiration that you can tap into and you can allow it to work through you, it becomes very difficult to actually transform yourself. Because there's a great idea that you can't solve the problems that you're suffering from the same plane of consciousness that created those problems. So if you look at your life now, you have a certain series of problems and opportunities, and those problems that you've created around you have been created from a particular plane of consciousness. And if you remain only on that plane of consciousness, it's very hard for you to see how to do anything differently, because you could only see so much. And that's why you chose certain decisions and made certain actions. You were trying the best with the information you had. But to go beyond that, you need some more information. You need to elevate your consciousness. So perhaps you can see the situation more clearly, or see something more deep and profound.
Yeah, there's a beautiful poem. I forget the poet, but a line from a poem. A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? A man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what is a heaven for? This
Yeah.
idea of something beyond that you cannot quite reach, but you have to strive towards it. And then the striving itself, that is the idea of heaven. And that is the aspiration. Aspiration is a striving, is a yearning. Did you
Yeah.
have more about dreams?
What's that? Sorry?
Did you have some more about dreams?
Yeah. So what I was going to talk about with dreams was that, so Carl Jung, he came up with a slightly different method of trying to understand dreams. And one of the things he was trying to do was that he understood that there's many of the problems and many of the parts of our reality that are not perfect are the parts that we actually can't see. And so he had a great comment where he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And so Sri
Brilliant.
Chinmoy would often talk about this, and he had this great analogy that we all have within us some parts that are in darkness. And so what we need to do at some point is we need to illumine the darkness within us. So if we're only ever thinking of beautiful things and, angels and heaven, but within us, there's still all of this unillumined darkness, it becomes very painful and difficult for us to actually connect with those higher realities. And so there's this great idea that, and Sri Chinmoy had this wonderful analogy that, if there's darkness, what do you need to do? All you need to do is bring an electrician, and he can just come and he can put in a light, and you turn on the light, and then suddenly all of that darkness is illumined. And
So
so
who's the electrician here?
so your soul or your spirit, the highest part of yourself has to be the divine part of yourself has to bring light into the unillumined parts of yourself. But if you're always afraid and never want to go near those parts of yourself, at some point you'll be forced to face him, and perhaps you'll be forced to face him in a way, or perhaps they'll manifest themselves in your life in ways that are not beautiful and not conducive to your happiness and well-being. And so Jung really felt that a dream was a way for that the darker parts or the unillumined parts of your being to reveal information to you, to reveal things that perhaps that you weren't seeing before. So he really divided proper, like, serious dreams, like valuable dreams, into two sorts. So you had the big dreams, which is those ones you have only a handful of in your life, and they're dreams that you will always remember. Like, if you have had a big dream before, you will remember it for the rest of your life. And very often, some people will feel that some of the most significant experiences they've had are these big dreams, because the way they make you feel, they feel so profound and beautiful that
They
they
feel sometimes more real than reality itself. They're more real than when you wake up. It's like, oh, wait a minute. I was in this tremendous reality, and now I'm just back in my bed. Like, it's, yeah.
yeah. But the other type of dreams that he thought were important were compensatory dreams. So what a compensatory dream is, it's the unconscious part of your being, because the thing is, you have to remember, we're dealing with a lot of information is coming into us every day, and we're dealing with our conscious mind. So we're using our mind, which is a filter, and so we're kind of filtering out the information that seems valuable and important. But all of that information is coming in and has to go somewhere. So it actually comes in and is inside us in our unconscious. And this is what Jung said about this. He said, the unconscious is the dark being within that hears what our conscious ears do not hear and sees what our conscious eyes do not perceive. We only become aware of this unheard hearing, this unseen seeing, when the unconscious sends us these forgotten images and dreams. So
Ah,
so that then starts to make dreams really fascinating, where
yeah.
in a dream you might see someone that, is represented in a very dark light, and very often perhaps you have thought well of them, or you've had good interactions with them, but perhaps the unconscious part of you has seen and heard things that you're trying to ignore. So, for example, if you have the image of someone, is in some sort of, dark light, and you perhaps have picked up on those things, but perhaps your conscious mind has not wanted to admit that to yourself. So,
Yeah.
that person might be someone you work with, or you've got, a relationship with, or a family relationship. And so you're trying to sort of hide those things from yourself. And very often that the only way that your being can share those things and bring them into your awareness is actually by putting them in dreams in a more symbolic fashion. So, but the idea of a compensatory dream is that it's that unconscious part of your being is trying to reveal those things to you. So an example that they use is that if you're a father and you have these dreams that your children hate you, and what that dream is trying to tell you is you're not being the father you could be. You're not being there in the way that your children need you to be. So it's like the unconscious part of your being, or the subconscious, has seen that you're not fully present. You're not being the father that you need to be for the children. And so it'll come to you in that sort of form, that you have this dream that your children are hating you. And so a lot of information can be revealed if we're open to looking and we understand what the procedure is, or what the process that we're actually experiencing is. That this is information that we've taken in, but we haven't ever rationally, logically looked at it before. And so it's going to come up. And the other really interesting thing is, and there's been a lot of cases of this, of people in their dreams have had medical diagnoses from the unconscious part of your being. So the
Mm.
subconscious is much more attuned to what's happening in the physical body. And so I know there's been cases where people have had dreams like of an explosion in their body, and then at some point, in the not too distant future, they had an aneurysm, like an explosive bleeding event in their body, or they see a different, some sort of swollen or some sort of uncomfortable part of their being, and then it turns out that they have some sort of illness in that particular region. So yeah, I think that's really fascinating that there is the possibility that dreams are sharing with us information, and very often, if your being takes the time and effort to create these images and create these stories that it's showing you, I mean, I think the worst thing you could do is just say, "Oh, it's just all random nonsense." It's
Yeah.
because yeah, like we've talked about previously, you can either imagine that we live, and like we talked about this last week, I think. You can either imagine that the universe knows what it's doing, and it has it is complete and perfect in its own form. And then when you take that position, then you don't see things as just random occurrences. You don't just say, "Oh, that's just some random functioning of the brain." It's like, no, the universe knows what it's doing, and it knows how it's trying to go about sharing information with you. And so, and the other interesting thing about the information you get is it always comes in some sort of narrative form. It's like you never get a monologue. There's not some sort of disembodied head in your dream that is telling you the things you need to know. Instead,
Yeah.
it's always, you're watching some sort of a film or a show where there's different characters and you're one of the characters and you have different events happen. And so to me, that shows how fundamental stories are to our experience of reality, because it seems the only way the subconscious part of our being can share this important information is by showing us stories. It has to be in a narrative, in a story form.
Right. Yeah, and that's where dreams are notorious for. Like they're stories, but they're so absurd sometimes. They don't follow the normal arc of storytelling that we see in the day-to-day life, in films or in books. They
Yeah.
make no sense in the ordinary storytelling way. They're just sometimes flawed and they're just weird when you recount them. When they happen, they seem completely logical and normal. But when you try to recount them, it's like, oh yeah, and then my face changed, and oh yeah, then I was in another room, and oh yeah, then my father, who I thought it was my father, was actually my friend, and all this is totally normal in the dream, but completely absurd when you try to tell it. That's also
Yeah.
such a discrepancy, right? When you try to explain a dream.
That is such a good point. And it really shows that you're using the wrong form. So when you try to understand your dream with your rational, logical mind, it makes zero sense. But yet in the
Yeah,
dream world where you were using some other parts of your being, it totally made sense. Like because you were
yes,
in, it's like going
that way.
from the symbolic world to the world of language and form and
Yeah,
logic. And so that's the difficult thing, is to translate, the experience you had in the dream, because very often there's a particular feeling around the dream as well that you really understand and feel.
yeah,
And so Carl Jung had another really great point, and so he said there's three major ways of looking at your dream. So there's looking at it as an objective reality. So like things are happening, and you look at it as though these are all just purely external things. So you see a man, and you see a dog, and you see your friend, and you see your father, and they're representing those exact things. That was actually your friend, that is your father, that is a man, and that's a dog. So that's one level of looking at the dream. So you can look at it in that way. And so the next level, it becomes the purely subjective. So in a subjective, when you're looking at it from the point of view of the subjective, everything is a representation of things that are going on inside you. And so it's not really actually your friend. It's actually some part of your being that you need to reconnect with, and that you need to, find some wholeness. And it's not really your father. It's more, it's the strong masculine part of your being that you need to manifest more fully. And that's not really actually even a dog. That's actually your playful, energetic nature, and that you need to be connect with that. So you can see, you could look at the same exact dream and get two totally different realities from it, from just simply the lens you're looking through.
is he saying that both those realities can be true?
Yeah, and so different types of dreams, I think you have to use your own intuition and your wisdom as to like, okay, is this dream actually what it looks like? And if it's not,
Yeah.
okay, it's not actually what I'm seeing, like perhaps then it's showing me and revealing something about my own nature. And then the deepest level of the dream is the archetypal level. And this is where you start to have like the archetypal characters, which is like an archetype is a form that exists across time. And so like it's the hero, or it's the devouring mother, or it's there's an infinite number of archetypes. And but why an archetype is powerful is it's a synthesis of all of the beings, all of the humans or people who've ever existed, who displayed and acted out that behavior. So and so over time, like it's like the good king and the evil king. It's like over centuries, there's been many good kings and there's been many evil kings. And so none of those individuals are the archetype, but it's like the energy and the consciousness and the form of what it means to be a good king and what it means to be an evil king. And
Or a
so,
mother or a father or a
yes.
dog.
Yeah, exactly. And so when you look at the dream as well, like you can look at it from an archetypal perspective as well. So you could say, okay, that's not actually my father. It's like an archetype of, the father. This is not actually this type of being. It's actually showing me something on an archetypal level. So you can see that dreams, and it's quite obvious when you start to think about it that yeah, there's actually a lot of information in the dream, and just depending on what lens I'm choosing to look at it, will determine what I think the dream means. And so I think the best way to actually get some clarity with your dreams is once you've remembered as much as you can um, of the dream, is just to carry it around with you and wait until, and like keep returning it to it, like keep returning to it and like putting yourself in the dream and keep experiencing it again and again until you come to a way of understanding it that clicks into place. And so what I mean, it's we've all heard that saying, or something clicked into place, or something fell into place, but it actually is a physical experience, is what we're like a psychic experience, we could say, where if you're thinking about something for a long time, and then suddenly it feels like the whole thing suddenly comes to life in a different way, like it all falls into place, and like the information that you're looking at and the information you have, suddenly you understand how they actually connect together. And I've had this a couple of times, and one of the first times I had this really on a really profound way was we've talked about this kind of Jewish koan of a being that is omniscient, omnipresent, immortal. What is it lacking? And I thought about that for a long time, and it was like when I understood the answer that it's lacking limitation. So many different ideas fell into place at that moment, and it almost felt like something clicked in my head. And it was the most unique experience. I was like, oh, that's what that's saying, something clicking into place. I actually felt like, oh, that's what it actually means. Um,
Yeah.
so this is a good way to actually deal with your dreams, because you can spend forever just diving into them and going around and around and never be truly sure that you've understood what they mean until I think you have that experience, because I think it's some inner reality. It's like the intuitive higher part of you being is giving you confirmation, okay, that yes, now you've understood properly what the
Yeah.
meaning of the dream was.
Yeah, what really resonates with me is this idea that you are the only one to really interpret your dreams. Like, I don't believe in these books that say, okay, a lamp means this, a dog means that. I don't think that's really true on the deepest level. But your soul, knows what the message of the dream is. So that's I think it's very good advice to meditate on the dream. I think that's what you're talking about, to have the
Yeah.
dream with you, to really meditate on it and to not expect anything, and especially not allow your rational mind to interfere, because I think that's the biggest obstacle, is to have your rational mind trying to make sense of it. It's not capable of doing that. It's your intuition, your soul, who will give you the message at some point. And yeah, that's beautifully explained how that can click into place. And we're talking about big dreams, and I just wanted to share one of my big dreams that I think, it was so obvious. And sometimes these big dreams, they're immediately clear what they mean. I mean, this was, in my case, was completely the case. I knew the minute I woke up what that dream meant, and it was a really powerful message. I think this is the most beautiful and powerful dream I've had in my life. And this happened to me when I was 20 years old, and I was actually a seeker. I just started my spiritual journey. I was meditating, and I had just been following meditation classes at the Sri Chinmoy Center in my hometown of Amsterdam. And I've been in those classes for a number of months, and they really inspired me. So everything about the class I loved. I loved the meditations. I loved the books of Sri Chinmoy, and I had a real resonance with him as a teacher. But then the question was like, do I want to become his follower, his disciple, his student? That was really like in the forefront of my mind. I was really looking for a spiritual path, but I wasn't sure if I was going to dive into this one. And, if it was up to my rational mind, I would have doubted and like gone over this maybe for many, many more months and perhaps not even taken the plunge, because it really is like a plunge to dive into a spiritual path and really commit to it. And I did feel this is going to be a lifelong commitment. It is not a fluke. It is not something, a hobby or something. It's a really lifelong commitment. And are you ready to do that? And so I had this dream one night where I was in the town of Leiden, which is one of the famous university cities in the Netherlands. And in my language, in Dutch, it is spelled Leiden. That is the name of the town. But funnily enough, in my dream, it was spelled a little bit different with a long, what we call in Dutch, a long Y. It's spelled Lijden. It's pronounced exactly the same way, Leiden, but we spell it differently. And in this particular spelling, it is the Dutch word for suffering. So that was
Oh.
very significant. I was in the town of Leiden, spelled as suffering.
Mhm.
And so when I was in this town, there came a very colorful, beautiful car came my way. This very small, it was kind of like this old Beetle car. And out of the car came Sri Chinmoy. Somebody opened the door for him. He came out of the car and he walked towards me, this beautifully colorful car, and he shook my hand. And when he shook my hand, this unbelievable spiritual energy enveloped my entire being. It was flowing around me. Was overcome with peace and joy and love and all these beautiful qualities. And then I woke up. And when I woke up, it was not just that the dream was gone, this energy was still inside me. And so I've never experienced that before, that a dream actually gave me a tremendous spiritual energy. And when I woke up, it was still there. And that is the moment that I've really felt, okay, Sri Chinmoy is your guru, is your master, and you should follow him. So that is when I decided to join his path. And, this was in 98, so we're 27 years later, and I'm still here. And that was a real dream that you could say changed my life, or it pushed my life to a decision that I needed to make and that I was not ready perhaps to make purely based on my rational mind. I needed something deeper to convince me of that this was the right step to take.
And you still do you feel like you've left the village of Leiden now, the village of suffering?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, that's a very good question. Yes, I have to say that Sri Chinmoy did manage to take me out of that suffering. And I remember at the time when I was 20 and I was a young seeker, I was struggling with a lot of issues that I no longer struggle with. Things like how I would have these mood swings from one day to the next. So I would one day feel happy and elated, and another day I would feel a little bit sad or depressed, and I had no control over that. So there was no permanent state of happiness. And that is definitely one thing that through the help of my guru, I feel, and the spiritual life, that has completely changed. Like I feel that there's a very solid and permanent state of inner happiness and inner joy that I can go back to at any time. So, and there's many other things, but yes, I'm no longer in the town of suffering in that respect.
Yeah, and that was nice that he came in a bright colored little car, because he did actually like little cars.
Yeah, it was such a beautifully colored. It was like almost like the colors of the soul or whatever you want to,
Mm.
interpret that. And yeah, did you have any big dreams like that that you can share?
So yeah, so I actually I dived much more deeply into the world of dreams during the COVID years, because there was a period of time where I wasn't able to travel outside the country. And so I still wanted to have some adventures. And so I was having as many adventures in New Zealand as I possibly could. But I also realized that perhaps there was some inner adventures to have. So I
Mm,
took the position at that point that I would start to really value dreams and the information that they could transmit to me. And so One of the most important things for me in my spiritual life is the idea of integration. And so Sri Chinmoy's guru, Sri Aurobindo, his entire style of yoga was called integral yoga. And so the idea in integral yoga, and I think this is also true for Sri Chinmoy's teachings, is that there's a real emphasis on trying to get all of the different disparate parts of the being into alignment. So we want to align everything either coming from the top down, so the soul and the heart, the mind, the vital, and the physical. Or if we look from the other way up, bringing the physical into alignment with the vital and the mind and the heart and the soul. But this idea became very important to me at that time of my life, and so I was really, really valuing it, and I was trying to manifest it in my life in some way. This idea that I was going to bring in and all of the parts of my being into some form of integration and alignment together. So, and the reason this is important, as we've all experienced this, is that there will be times when your own different parts of your being will fight against each other. So you will have some higher ideals, you'll have some vision of what you would like to do or become, but then suddenly your fear and your doubt will come to the fore, and it will start fighting against the dream of your mind, of your heart and your soul. And so to me, this seems like such an untenable position to live your life like that, where you're not just having to fight with the world around you or see the fights, between different people and different countries, but actually realizing that you're actually doing that yourself at every day. And that's one thing I'd always say to people that complain about the conflict in the world. It's like, are you certain that you have no conflict going on within your own being? Because it seems like that's your responsibility. Like, you can't stop the conflict between two neighboring countries in another part of the world. But if you can't even stop the conflict within your own being between your physical and your vital and your heart and your soul, like, you're not in a great position to be lecturing anyone else about how they should be trying to
Well,
deal with.
I even believe that the outer conflicts are nothing other than a reflection of the inner conflict. So I think it's as within, so as without, so within, as within, so without. So, if we still have conflicts inside us, then that will manifest on the in the outer world as wars, as conflict between nations, between people. So yeah, the best thing we can do is to solve our own inner conflict.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I came up with, one of the ideas I came up with, or like how to bring my being into integration and how to integrate the different parts, was that I realized that it's very easy for us as spiritual seekers to look down on the lower parts of our being. So we look down at the physical body and we talk about it, oh, it's so full of lethargy. And we look at the vital and say it's so full of aggression and impurity, and we look at the mind, and we are always judging, judging, judging. And I realized that if we want to bring real oneness within our being, it can't be from a place of judgment and blame and criticism, that there actually has to be some understanding and respect and acknowledgement of the different parts of the being. So this would have been maybe 2019. And so I chose to accept all of the parts of my being, and I chose to believe that they all had their own wisdom. So the physical being has its own wisdom. And very often there is a true reality there. So it's trying to rest because it knows that food and resources are scarce, and that if you can rest more, you'll have more energy, if there's hard times coming. And, there's that desire to eat a lot, or, to eat more than you need, because the body's always worried that it's going to run out, because it has experienced that an infinite number of times across the centuries, that Earth has been a really difficult place to be in a physical body. So there is some wisdom in the body, and just the same way with all of the different levels. The mind is often trying to protect us from suffering and hardship. It's trying to steer us away from situations where we could lose face and become offside or become an outsider, because that would be fatal in the past. So there's all of this. Each of the levels of our being has its own reality and its own wisdom. And so if you can choose to accept them and to say, okay, I honor and respect the messages and the information you're trying to pass on to me. And I think by doing that, it immediately starts to create a more harmonious feeling within your own being. And then how this relates to dreams is that in 2019 and 2020, I had a whole series of dreams. And in these dreams, it was always, I was watching scenarios play out. So I was watching, like a scene being played out, but it wasn't, I wasn't one being. I was five beings. I was the five different parts of my being. So I could feel all of us standing there. So there was my representation of my physical, my vital, my mind, my heart, and my soul. And we were all,
Maybe explain quickly what the vital is. Maybe that'll be clear for some people.
yeah. So the vital is the energetic forces that flow through us and power us. So they're the forces that, that lead to procreation, and are the forces that the really the driving engine of physical manifestation. Like they're the energy that's embodied inside the physical and is driving it to seek food and shelter and
Usually it's
procreate.
located in the centers below the navel,
Yeah,
the vital, right?
exactly,
That
exactly.
underbelly.
And so the one I'll share is, I was looking at this beautiful, it was a scene that looked like a French romantic artist painting of a beautiful nature scene. So it was kind of like very soft and like kind of smudged, but it was this beautiful scene with this beautiful grove. There's a beautiful grove of trees, and there was a beautiful meadow. And I was lying down in the middle of the meadow. So I was watching myself, but I could see my body. I was lying face down on the ground. It was a beautiful sunny day. You could see the blue sky. And in the corner of the meadow, there was a pond. And so all of the parts of my being are standing there, and we're all watching this scene play out. And then at some point from the pond, out climbs a crocodile. So suddenly its head appears, and then its shoulders and its arms and its body, and it starts walking towards me. And I'm lying face down on the ground, so I'm unaware. I can't see what's happening around me. And this crocodile is coming from behind me, and it walks up to me, and then it climbs up on top of me and lies down on top of me. And I remember the experience like very viscerally. I could feel the crocodile, the weight of it on my back, and I could feel its breathing. I could feel this hot, sweaty, smelly consciousness of this crocodile lying on top of my body. And all I wanted to do was to immediately get up and like get this crocodile off me. But it was so heavy and so big that like I was almost trapped underneath this crocodile. So it had like taken control of me. It had like come in and taken control of my being. And so all the parts of my being are watching this, and we're feeling this experience of this sort of oppression and this force coming in and taking over my being. And at some point, finally, I started to try and stand up. So I was pushing against the ground as hard as I could, and I slowly managed to get my chest off the ground. And at some point, I finally managed to get up, and I grabbed the crocodile by the tail, and then I started swinging it around above my head. And then I finally let it go, and it flew off into the distance.
Wow, what a cool little cowboy you were there.
And then there was this great moment where all of the parts of my being looked at the situation of what happened, and we all agreed, okay, we want to make sure that never happens again, that type of experience. And so what it represented for me, like what I understood from the dream, was that if I was not paying attention and aware, so like if I was lying face down on the ground, just enjoying the sunshine in the meadow, I was not paying proper attention to the world around me. And then there's forces, and the forces, you could think of the forces outside, but we also all have these, deep, dark forces inside us. And so the crocodile for me was like a representation of sort of that reptilian ancient animal drive for for everything that spirit needs, and that if I wasn't paying attention, that could come in at any moment and capture me and take over my being. And so all of my parts of my being saw the situation, and we all agreed that we would work together to try and avoid losing our awareness and losing our consciousness to some ancient reptilian part of the being. And since then, I've really felt that the parts of my being have become much, much better. They've become really, truly, in some level, really well integrated, I think. And so I don't have that same sort of sense of one part of my being wants to do something, and another part is wanting to do something else, because Sri Chinmoy talks about it, that the soul is like the older brother, and you have all of these younger brothers, and the older brother, he always knows what's best for the younger brothers. He can see that they're doing silly and foolish things, but very often they don't want to listen to him, so they just ignore him, or even worse, they start to rebel against him. And so you can't force those parts of your being to listen to the soul. And really, the only way you can actually start to transform the relationship between the soul and the other parts of your being is for them to start to feel a sense of oneness and respect and acknowledgement that they all have a role to play. I think that's first and foremost, that's a really important step. But then when they start to actually follow the oldest brother, when the lower parts start to follow the higher parts, and they start to see that your life becomes infinitely better, I think that is the thing that really captures, your body and your vital and your mind. When they start to see that if we actually listen to the heart and the soul, life becomes joyful. Life becomes so much fun, and we make progress, and we have positive interactions with the world, and the whole experience of life transforms in some way. And until you get to that point, you'll always still have to deal with some rebellion and some mutinies going on below you. But I think it's so worthwhile because, I mean, everyone's experienced, especially something on the physical level. You've decided, right, I'm going to make good decisions. I'm going to get up early in the morning. I'm going to eat well. And then before you know it, you've stayed up till 2 a.m. eating chocolate cake. And then the next morning you sleep till, 10 a.m. And it's like, who did this? Like, who
Yeah.
sabotaged my whole plan for living this beautiful life? And it's just simply that there's not harmony within the being. So,
Yeah. Yeah, so that's sometimes the soul you can describe it as the boss of a company, and the mind is more like the manager. And once the boss is gone, the mind is like, forget about that guy. I know what's best for us. Let's do exactly the opposite of what he's saying. We're doing it my way. And
yeah.
then the workers are like the other parts of the being are the workers that are under the manager. And so very often it is the mind that is taking over control, right? If we, don't put the soul in charge. And the mind very often scoffs at the heart and the soul. It's just like, these guys, they don't know what they're talking about. They're just building castles in the air. And we live especially in the Western world, we live in a society that has such a strong, highly developed mind, which has brought us many, many good things. I don't want to downplay everything in the mind, but when we start to develop spiritually, it's very important, I think, to see that the mind is not the place that we want to get our advice and wisdom from. There are higher instruments that we can use in our spiritual life, and we really have to sometimes fight with the mind in the sense that we should not listen to it for its advice. We've said this before. It's a great servant and a very poor master. And so, yeah, that's a beautiful analogy to put the soul on top and to try and align our other members. And I think it's very true what you said about giving them their proper role. Like, they have to be valued. They have to feel that they have their own proper role to play in the whole cosmic game. And then you have to find, I think you have to find ways of giving them that role. And that's what I love about our spiritual path, is that it's not only meditation, but it is also creativity. Sri Chinmoy himself was an artist, a poet, a musician, an author, and he really inspired us to also develop ourselves in these different creative ways, to write poems, to make music, compose music, or sing. We do sports, so that's something for the body and for the vital energies in us. We go on adventures together, we travel, we see the world. And so it's the integral yoga that is at the core of that. That is like, yoga is not just sitting down with your eyes closed and doing the inner work. That's, of course, an essential part of it, but it's definitely not the whole cake. There's so many other things that you can expand into, and that you can let these inspirations flow through, and then you get a very, very rich life. It's like the amalgam of the inner life and the outer life. Yeah, as we said a couple of episodes ago in the Maya episode, this outer life is not just an illusion. It is real, and it is the field of manifestation for the soul, so that all the qualities of the soul can manifest and can really, be brought into fruition. And hopefully we'll have a rich and more spiritual life that way.
Yeah, I totally agree. And the one thing I actually did want to quickly add is, I think when someone is sleepwalking, That's actually a time when it's either the physical or it might be the vital consciousness has taken over the body and gets you up, because at that point even your mind is not conscious. So it's not even just your heart and your soul are being put aside, but it's like the mind went to sleep and then the vital said, right, okay, let's do this. And because when you see if you've ever seen someone sleepwalking, which I have before, their consciousness is very strange. They're no longer themselves. They're almost like an automaton. Just kind of,
Yeah,
it's like this force has taken over and is just walking around, and they don't really even know what they're doing. It's just, it's
like
so
the golem. There this idea of
yeah.
the golem, this lumbering kind of puppet of clay.
So yeah, I think that's fascinating that it's not only that our mind can sometimes take control of the body, but I think sometimes if we're not paying attention, even the old vital crocodile can come
Yeah.
over and take the controls and start to try and walk you around. So be
So
careful.
I had another question about what if we have really bad dreams? So nightmares, that is also part of dreams. Sometimes it can be very negative. How should we deal with them?
I mean, first of all, I think the great thing to always remember is how joyful it is to wake up from a bad dream. It's like that
Mm,
moment of a relief that was
relief.
not reality. It's like, oh. And there's something really enjoyable about that relief. It's like when you are in the midst of it and it's like so crazy and horrible and people are dying and bad things are happening, whatever's going on. But that moment of release from it, that's what you want to hold on to, because that is what is going to await you when you wake up from this entire dream that we're having here of being these earthly beings. So I think that that's always a good reminder that there is, no matter how bad and difficult and dark things seem, that they too will pass. And at some point you will wake up and you'll realize that the whole thing is actually a dream.
Yeah,
So
and I would also say, like in the case of nightmares, I wouldn't take them too seriously. So these are
yeah,
not like hidden messages that are giving you a tremendous insight in your life. They really come from the darkest parts of our being, from the lower parts. And I remember reading something in Sri Chinmoy's writings where he also says, like, oh, you can actually discard dreams that come from the lower vital, from that
yeah.
really dark place. They're just like manifestations of that darkness inside us. And it just needs to be illumined. But it's not like this very deep wisdom or divine advice that is coming to the fore and giving us advice. You can safely discard these things. And he also even said that the soul tries to fight those dreams from becoming reality, because dreams
Mhm.
are very often precursors of a reality. When we imagine something in our waking life, we can call that a dream. If you have a certain dream or an imagination, that very often is a precursor of a reality if we work towards it. But in when we get dreams when we sleep, these are also things that are going to manifest themselves or can manifest themselves in the physical. But Sri Chinmoy actually wrote that the soul will very often act as a bodyguard and prevent certain lower realities from manifesting, which are not helping us, and will encourage and stimulate the higher realities from coming down to the earth plane and materializing in our life. So that's good to know that we have a bodyguard that is watching over us when we are sleeping. And he
Yeah,
said that sometimes the vital plays that role as well. The vital can act as a bodyguard and prevent certain dreams from manifesting.
yeah. We want all the bodyguards we can get in this game. Each
Yep.
each one plays its role. But I was just thinking actually as well, but that there have been also times where people have received really useful visionary information in dreams. So when we talked about intuition, we talked about how it's a different way of experiencing and receiving information, like an instantaneous knowing. Without needing to have all the information coming in through our senses. But there are a couple of really striking examples where people in their dreams have actually received very clear, very insightful information. And so one of those was actually the Russian chemist who came up with the periodic table. So I think that
Oh,
the periodic table actually appeared to him. And so the periodic table is an amazing thing because it orders all of the elements, I think, by atomic weight. And so, like, and to do it at the point in time that he did it without some of the technologies we have today, it was an amazing achievement. But I think he received the information as a dream and saw the correct order, and even it was perhaps the structure of the table, the way that we have the periodic table is actually laid out, actually came to him in a dream. And then the other one that I know of was the author of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So the famous story that came to him entirely in a dream. The story, which is,
Wow.
it's a very unusual and interesting story as well. So yeah, and I'm sure there's an infinite number more of these
I
cases.
know of the song "Let It Be" by
Yeah.
written by Paul McCartney and the Beatles. "Let It Be" came to Paul McCartney in a dream, the melody, and when he woke up,
Oh,
he immediately thought, "Oh, this was such a," and he really started. He took his guitar and he started playing just as long until he got it again. So that's
yeah.
another.
So yeah, it's beautiful to think that it's just not an absence of reality, the dream world. So when we go to sleep, don't just think that the everything shuts off and it's just, it's like the little death every night. I think it's
Yeah.
it's much more profound. So just like when we step into the final death at the end of our life, that is also not an extinction or the end of reality. Every night, I think there is many things going on. Who knows
Oh
what
yeah.
adventures your soul is having?
Absolutely. And maybe I have some practical advice for those if you are troubled by nightmares. There's a few things that you can do to prevent them. And one thing is to never cross your hands on your heart or your navel, because these are spiritual centers that have to be open during the night. Because actually, what is happening, what the spiritual masters have talked about, is that light is actually descending when we sleep. So it's actually very good if we sleep on our back or on our side, but never on our belly, because then we're also closing off the receiving end of our chakras. They're actually receiving light during the night. So never sleep on your stomach is one thing, on your back or on your side, and never cross your hands over your heart or your navel or any of the centers there, because they block the flow of light. And there's another thing that is very helpful. Is that is what Sri Chinmoy actually told us to do before we go to sleep, is to meditate on the navel chakra. So the chakra that is just 2 fingers below the navel. And just imagine a disc that is rotating there very powerfully, like a golden disc in the navel chakra. And that actually prevents us from having really bad dreams. So I've done this actually since I read about that. I've done that every night. And yeah, I actually never have nightmares. And I can sometimes feel this kind of energy that is expanding from my navel. And it's this very powerful protective force. And it's something that you can do just for a minute before you go to bed.
Yeah, that's really good. It's good for people to have some practical steps to take there, and I think sometimes as well that there are situations where nightmares are connected to our past lives or previous experiences in some way, and it's our being's way of trying to resolve those. And yeah, I've heard of many cases where people have had like especially from like childhood, they've been having certain types of nightmares, and it's not until they really understand the message, and like we talked about, like if you are suffering in some way from nightmares, trying to understand what especially if it's the same sort of information being given again and again, maybe the form changes slightly, but if it's the same type of energy and message, perhaps that there is something that once you glean the information, your lower, the unconscious part of your being will stop bothering you with this, because
Yeah.
it might be the case that it's like, hey, you need to know this. You need to know this
Yeah.
information. And
Okay. Yeah.
so that's one other thing to consider. So
Have you said everything that you wanted to say about dreams for this episode?
well, yeah, I mean, I like to zoom out a little bit as well, just on the topic of dreams, and then think that what if we imagined our life as a dream? Like we imagined that we were the type of being that every night when they went to sleep was able to dream a dream that was 80 years, 90 years of life. That every night you could have a dream like that, and over time, you would have all of the experiences that you could ever imagine. And you would have all the great adventures, you would have all the greatest pleasures, you would do this and you would do that. But it's a great thought experiment that if you imagine that you were the infinite consciousness that had this amazing power, that every night you could dream an entire life of experiences, at some point you would choose to do a couple of important things. And one of the first things to do was you would convince yourself to forget that you were dreaming. Because like if you were every night having, these amazing dreams, but you always knew it was a dream, in some ways it wouldn't be that meaningful. It wouldn't be that enjoyable. You're just like, oh, well, it's just all a dream. It's nothing, none of it's real. And so this is the idea of Maya or illusion, because Maya is the force that convinces us that this is real, that this is the show, this is it, this is everything that's going on. And so that's something really interesting to think about, that if you were an infinite consciousness with this type of power, that at some point you would make yourself forget that you were dreaming. And then the other really cool thing to think is, at some point, if you had enough time, you would choose to dream this exact moment that you were having. You would choose to dream this exact life in this exact particular moment. And for me, that's like, yeah, that's so cool. It's such a great idea and concept to try and take yourself out from this embodied form and imagine what it could possibly be like if your true nature was infinite consciousness and you were just simply having these experiences. And if we take life as a dream, in a dream, you're not trying to collect any material possessions, are you? You're not going about thinking, oh yes, I'm gonna get more money and then I can get a nicer car and a nicer house. Like
I don't know what bankers dream about, but I wouldn't be surprised if some bankers would dream that.
Yeah, like there's the dream of Scrooge McDuck, who was, the famous cartoon character, who was like the richest duck in the entire universe and would go swimming in his giant vault full of money. But I think if you think about the way that you would approach, like a beautiful dream, it's not, you would not get caught up purely in the material experience of it. You wouldn't be just trying to, set yourself up with a nice house and, a good pension fund and, get yourself all ready for your retirement. Like if you knew you were living a dream and that's what you were doing, you would think, wow, I've really missed the whole point of the dream, because it seems like a dream, the purpose of the dream is to learn things, to experience things, to have things revealed to you, and to reveal perhaps some part of your being that you haven't fully manifested yet. And so I always, for me personally, I find it really just a beautiful kind of analogy for the human experience, that perhaps it's more dreamlike than we perhaps give it credit for, and perhaps we should live it as more of an adventure and a story. Because a good dream is like a good film; it has to have some adventure, and it has to have some, it has to have us expressing some qualities that we actually appreciate and we value. So,
yeah. Yeah, thank you very much. And thank you, dear listeners, for joining us this far. If you like our podcast, please consider subscribing. You can tell a friend, or you can leave a comment for us. We always love to read those. And we will see you in the new year. And we may already reveal that, yes, we are going to change the name of our podcast once again. But somehow we felt that we hadn't really hit on the right name. So we will come back with that in the new year with a new name and the same podcasts. And have a wonderful time and see you soon.
Thank you.